Chapter 1. The Test Strip and the Boss. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting golden streaks across the white-tiled bathroom floor. Sophia Lane stared at the pregnancy test in her hand, her knuckles white around the stick, as if sheer force could will a different result. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. She was 5 weeks pregnant. Her breath caught in her throat, the air suddenly too thick. Her heart beat an erratic rhythm, part disbelief, part panic, part something too tender to name. Slowly, she sank onto the toilet lid, her fingers shaking, her mind racing. Julian Kingsley. The name struck her like thunder. The man who had called her manipulative, sneaky, a social climber who clawed her way into his office 3 years ago using what he called dirty little tricks. The same man who never missed an opportunity to look at her as though she were gum stuck to his $1,000 shoe. And yet, she was carrying his child. Sophia let out a shaky breath and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her sharp cheekbones looked even sharper, her dark brown eyes clouded with anxiety and determination. There was no use crying. She had made her decision weeks ago when she hadn't taken the morning after pill, caught in a stupid mix of hope and heartbreak. "I'll do it alone," she whispered to herself. "Like I've done everything else." She dressed swiftly and efficiently in a charcoal gray pencil skirt and cream blouse professional, tidy, unremarkable. No one could suspect a thing. Not yet. As she stood in the kitchen sipping tea, her phone buzzed. A new email. From Julian Kingsley. Subject: Report status. Time: 6:59 a.m. Cold. Efficient. Perfectly Julian. Sophia deleted the draft of her resignation email for the 3rd time and let out a low sigh. She had been about to quit. In fact, she had written the resignation letter last night after the 2nd positive test. But then, reality had hit her. The rent, doctor's appointments, baby supplies, maternity leave. And what would Julian think if she suddenly disappeared? No, resigning now would only raise suspicion. For now, she'd stay. For the baby, Sophia arrived at Kingsley Tower at 8 a.m. sharp, like she always did. The building, an iconic steel and glass structure, stood as tall and rigid as the man who ran it. Julian Kingsley's office occupied the entire top floor. His secretary, Sophia Lane, occupied the desk just outside it. She was the gatekeeper, the buffer, the woman he despised and relied on more than he liked to admit. She was sorting emails when his office door swung open. "Miss Lane," he said, his voice clipped. Sophia turned, carefully composed. "Good morning, Mr. Kingsley." He looked at her as if she were a spreadsheet error. His navy blue suit clung perfectly to his tall, lean frame, and his eyes icy gray, calculating narrowed ever so slightly. "You were supposed to confirm the Sterling meeting by 8 o'clock. "It's confirmed. I sent the calendar update 10 minutes ago." He blinked. Just once. "Fine." And with that, he turned back inside without so much as a thank you. Sophia exhaled silently. She was used to this. Julian Kingsley had perfected the art of being cold without being outright cruel. It was part of the reason he was feared and respected throughout the corporate world. But she had seen another side once. A brief, human flash when he thought no one was watching. 2 months ago, she'd sprained her ankle carrying files from the archive room. He had personally driven her to the clinic. He hadn't spoken much, and the next day, it was as if it never happened. And then, one night 3 weeks ago, when a board celebration turned into a tipsy celebration, and they were the last 2 in the executive lounge, she blushed. It had been a moment, one filled with heat and softness and vulnerability, a kiss that tasted like regret and longing, a night where the cold CEO had touched her like she was something delicate, precious. Now, she had proof of that night growing inside her. Sophia pressed her hands against her desk, trying to ground herself. She could practically feel the memory of that night prickling at the back of her neck. Julian's hand on her waist, his breath against her skin, the way he had whispered her name, like it was something he'd never dared say out loud before. She shook her head. "That man doesn't love you. That night was a mistake to him." Still, it had left a mark, one that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Her stomach turned not from morning sickness this time, but from the weight of truth. This child, This tiny life she hadn't even heard a heartbeat from yet deserved more than a mother hiding behind a desk and a father who loathed the idea of her existence. Sophia clicked open a new document. To Julian Kingsley. Subject: Resignation Notice. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Before she could begin typing, the sound of the elevator chimed. Out walked Eleanor Kingsley, elegant in her pale lavender suit, her every step a demonstration of practiced poise and judgment. Sophia's breath hitched. Eleanor offered her the kind of smile that was sharp enough to cut. "Good morning, Miss Lane." "Good morning, Mrs. Kingsley," Sophia replied politely, standing. "I need to see Julian," she said, her voice clipped. "Urgently." Sophia pressed the intercom. "Mr. Kingsley, your mother is here to see you." Julian's annoyed voice came through immediately. "Let her in." Sophia opened the door, careful not to meet Eleanor's eyes too long. The woman had always been suspicious of her. And now, with a secret growing inside her? She swallowed hard. Eleanor brushed past her with a small sniff. "Still here, I see," she murmured, just loud enough for Sophia to hear. An hour later, Julian emerged from his office with his jaw tight and expression darker than usual. Eleanor followed, her smile too satisfied for comfort. "I trust you'll give me what I need, Julian," she said as she walked toward the elevator. "I'll think about it," he replied curtly. Sophia didn't ask what that was about. It wasn't her place. But when Julian paused at her desk, she stiffened. He glanced down at her. "You look pale." She blinked. That was unexpected. "I'm fine." He eyed her skeptically for a second longer, then walked away without another word. The second the elevator doors closed behind him, Sophia let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That afternoon, during her break, she stepped out of the building for some fresh air and comfort food. Her feet led her to a small deli nearby where she ordered chicken feet soup, craving the sour, spicy flavor that suddenly felt like a lifeline. When she returned to her desk, a small paper bag sat on it. She frowned. It wasn't hers. She opened it. Inside were chicken feet, braised and perfectly packed. A tiny post-it was attached. "Didn't look like you ate lunch. You once said this is your comfort food. J." Sophia's heart stumbled. She sat slowly, eyes locked on the note. Julian remembered? He remembered her rambling about how chicken feet reminded her of the tiny corner shop near the orphanage where she grew up, about how the old lady who owned it gave her a bowl whenever she had a bad day. She had told him that during a rare lull in the office, back when she still believed he might not hate her. She had never expected him to retain such a detail. The corners of her lips trembled as she stared at the bag. It was such a small gesture, but it was so. Julian, unemotional on the surface, thoughtful underneath. That night, as she lay in bed, one hand resting protectively over her belly, Sophia whispered to the ceiling, "Why did it have to be him? Julian Kingsley, who didn't believe in love. Julian Kingsley, who thought she was a liar. Julian Kingsley, who remembered her comfort food. And maybe, just maybe, wasn't as cold as he appeared." She turned over and pulled the blanket tighter. For now, she would stay for the child. But deep down, she feared she was also staying for something else. For hope. For the tiniest sliver of what might one day become love. Chapter 2. Misunderstandings and Mixed Signals. It started with a coffee spill. Sophia was handing Julian a folder when her elbow caught the edge of his cup. The liquid sloshed onto his crisp white shirt, staining the fabric a warm brown. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, instinctively reaching forward with napkins. Julian flinched, startled more by her sudden closeness than the actual spill. "It's fine," he muttered stiffly, plucking the napkins from her hand and dabbing at his chest. Sophia winced. "I'll have it sent to dry cleaning." "I wasn't." "Miss Lane," he interrupted, "you've already done enough." Her heart sank at the chill in his voice. She stepped back, lips pressed together, forcing down the sting. She returned to her desk, fingers trembling slightly as she typed out the dry cleaning request. Behind her, Julian's door clicked shut. In his office, Julian sat at his desk, staring at the coffee stain. But what replayed in his mind wasn't irritation, it was the way Sophia had looked at him. Concerned. Genuinely so. Not like the others who fawned to gain favor. Why do you care so much, he thought, annoyed with himself. Still, he hadn't yelled. That was progress, wasn't it? Later that week, Sophia left a folder of marketing contracts on Julian's desk, only to find him standing by the window with a far-off expression. He didn't turn when he spoke. Are you dating someone? The question landed like a slap. Sophia blinked. What? I heard your voice on the phone yesterday. You sounded affectionate. She bit the inside of her cheek to hide her flustered expression. The boyfriend ruse had been a whim, an impulsive attempt to test whether Julian noticed her at all. She hadn't expected it to work. Apparently, it had, so she smiled sweetly. Yes. He's a good man. Steady. Not the emotionally repressed type. Julian finally turned, his expression unreadable. That was it? Sophia forced a chuckle. Not that it's your business, Mr. Kingsley. You're my employee, he replied curtly, crossing his arms. Anything that may affect your work is my business. Oh, then you'll be thrilled to know he's very supportive of my career. Julian's jaw tensed. He said nothing more. Sophia turned to leave, but not before catching the brief flash of something strange in his eyes. Jealousy? By Friday, the air between them had grown dense with unspoken tension. Sophia found herself acutely aware of Julian's presence. The way he leaned a little closer when asking questions, the quiet, accidental brushes of hands when passing files, his narrowed eyes whenever she answered imaginary texts from her non-existent boyfriend. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt confused. Was it possible Julian cared? No, the man didn't do feelings. And yet, Sophia's thoughts were interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Miss Lane? A man stood at the front desk, holding a bouquet of bright tulips. He was handsome in a boy-next-door kind of way, with dark brown eyes and a kind smile. Sophia's brows rose. Yes? These are for you, he said, handing her the flowers. From Matthew. Matthew? Oh, right, her fictional boyfriend. Ah, thank you, she said awkwardly, taking the bouquet. The delivery guy left, and Julian stepped out of his office just in time to witness the scene. His eyes zeroed in on the flowers. Tulips? He asked flatly. Sophia nodded, lifting the card. To the most brilliant woman I know. She smiled with forced sweetness. He's romantic, isn't he? Julian's mouth thinned. Tulips are common. She arched an eyebrow. So are roses. He said nothing and returned to his office with a clipped, back to work. Inside, Julian closed the door harder than necessary. His mind raced, full of unwelcome thoughts. So Sophia was dating someone, a serious someone. One who sent her flowers and called her brilliant. That word stuck in Julian's mind like a barb. Why did it bother him so much? Because she deserves better, he told himself. Someone who doesn't lie their way into a job. But as he sat at his desk, his eyes kept drifting to the glass door and the woman behind it laughing softly as she arranged her tulips. Why does it feel like she's slipping away from me? Meanwhile, Sophia stared at the flowers, the guilt creeping in. What are you doing, Lane? She asked herself. This little game isn't helping anything. Yet, part of her relished the flicker of something human in Julian's expression, a flare of possessiveness, of interest, even if unspoken. But she couldn't let herself fall for illusions. He might care in passing, but that didn't erase the years of contempt. Or the way he'd once said, "You're exactly the kind of woman I never trust." She had made peace with loving him in silence. Now, her child would become her focus. Still, when Julian returned hours later with a takeout bag and said, "You forgot to eat again," her heart skipped in spite of herself. Sophia stared at the takeout bag as if it were a rare artifact. Is that for me? Julian didn't meet her eyes. You've skipped lunch 3 times this week. I didn't realize you were keeping track, she replied cautiously, taking the bag. The warmth from the container seeped into her fingers like a small comfort. I notice a lot of things, Julian said softly, then turned away before she could reply. Sophia blinked. That was new. Inside the bag was hot miso soup, sticky rice, and salmon teriyaki, the exact meal she always ordered from that Japanese place down the street. He remembered. She looked up, only to find his office door closed again. Her chest tightened, a confusing mixture of gratitude, guilt, and a rush of warmth she didn't want to feel. That evening, as most of the staff filtered out, Sophia stayed behind to finish preparing reports for Monday's executive meeting. She was reading the last page when Julian's door creaked open. "You're still here?" he asked. She didn't look up. "I figured I'd finish these tonight. Less stress Monday morning." There was a pause. "You're working too much." She laughed lightly. "That's rich coming from you." He smirked, a rare, devastating thing that made her insides flutter against her will. "Touché." He walked closer, resting a hip against the edge of her desk. The mood shifted gentler, quieter. "You've changed," he said after a moment. Sophia raised a brow. "Changed? Your Kira lately?" Guarded. She tilted her head. "And you care?" Julian hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Silence stretched between them, not tense, but thick with meaning. Sophia's heartbeat echoed in her ears. Part of her wanted to lean into it, to confess everything about the baby, the fear, the reason she stayed. But before she could speak, Julian added, "If it's because of Matthew, I just want to say..." She blinked, surprised. "Say what?" "I hope he knows what he's got," Julian said. "You're remarkable." The word struck her like a spark. Julian looked away quickly, as though ashamed of the softness in his voice. He stood, clearing his throat. "Get home safe, Miss Lane." And then he left. Sophia didn't move for a full minute. Remarkable? Julian Kingsley, the man who once said he couldn't trust her, who questioned her every action, had just called her remarkable. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "Did you hear that, little one?" A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away before it could fall any further. This wasn't love. Not yet. But something had shifted. Maybe, just maybe, there was a crack in the wall Julian had built between them. The next day, Sophia arrived to find a curious package on her desk, a medium-sized gift box, neatly wrapped in silver with a navy ribbon. No card. Inside, a single pair of orthopedic shoes. Flat. Softsoled. Supportive. She laughed. Actually laughed. Only Julian would express concern about her working too hard by sneakily ordering her practical shoes. She looked over at his closed office door and shook her head. "Stupid," she muttered fondly, completely emotionally stunted. But stupid in the sweetest way. She slipped the shoes on. Perfect fit. But sweetness rarely lasts long in the world, Sophia Lane had come to know. That afternoon, she received an unexpected call on the office line. "Miss Lane," a smooth, cold voice said. "This is Vanessa Sterling." Sophia's blood chilled. She had only met Vanessa twice, once at a company gala and once at a board meeting. Both times, the woman had looked at her like a fly on a crystal goblet. "What can I do for you, miss?" "Sterling? I'd like to have lunch with you. Tomorrow. Noon. Café Moderne." Sophia paused. "I'm afraid I have a full schedule." "Clear it." Vanessa said simply. "You wouldn't want to come across as uncooperative." The line went dead. Sophia stared at the receiver, her stomach knotting. She had no idea what Vanessa wanted. But something told her it wasn't good. Chapter 3. Lunch with the Enemy. Café Moderne was all white marble and minimalist elegance, nestled in the heart of midtown Manhattan like a shrine to wealth and power. Sophia sat at a small corner table, her posture poised, every muscle taut beneath her cream blouse. She was early. Of course she was. Growing up an orphan, she'd learned that being early wasn't just polite, it was self-preservation. Show them you're useful, compliant, prepared. It's how you survived. She toyed with her water glass, her thoughts flicking back to the woman she was waiting for. Vanessa Sterling, heiress of the Sterling conglomerate. Model perfect. Perfectly terrifying. Rumors had long whispered of an arranged merger marriage, really between Julian Kingsley and Vanessa. Old money and new ambition. a picture-perfect power couple in the eyes of society. Cold. Calculated. And now, that very woman had requested a meeting with her Sophia Lane, the supposedly manipulative secretary. The click of stiletto heels on tile pulled Sophia from her thoughts. Vanessa arrived in a storm of designer silk and intimidating beauty. Her icy blonde hair was pulled into a sleek chignon, not a strand out of place. Her lipstick matched her nails, blood red. "Sophia," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, sliding gracefully into the chair opposite. "I appreciate your punctuality." Sophia nodded calmly. "Of course." Vanessa set her purse down with delicate precision. "I'll be direct. I don't like you." Sophia blinked. "Noted. And more importantly," Vanessa continued, folding her hands, "you're standing in the way of something very important to me." Sophia Tilhahil. "Julian?" Vanessa's smile widened, amused. "Smart girl. I underestimated you." "I'm not in Julian's way," Sophia said evenly. "I work for him. That's all." Vanessa's laugh was light and mocking. "Please, let's not pretend. I've seen the way he looks at you. Like you're a puzzle he can't solve and desperately wants to. I know men like him. They always fall for the tragedy in the room." Sophia's throat tightened. "Poor little orphan, rising up the ranks," Vanessa mused. How did it feel to trap him that night? The air stilled. Sophia gripped her napkin beneath the table. "Excuse me? Oh, come now. You expect me to believe that night happened organically? That you didn't plan it?" Vanessa leaned in, her tone syrupy. "A little wine. A little vulnerability. Perfect timing." Sophia didn't flinch. That night was a mistake, one I've lived with every day since. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "So noble." A waiter approached, but neither of them acknowledged him. The tension at the table was too thick, the quiet too dangerous. "I'm giving you a choice," Vanessa said, voice low now, deadly calm. "Leave Kingsley Group. Quietly. Resign within the next 2 weeks. I'll even send you a generous severance." Sophia raised a brow. "And if I don't?" Vanessa's smile returned. "Then I'll make things unpleasant. You'll be painted as a schemer. The woman who seduced the CEO to get ahead. Don't think the media won't eat that up." Sophia's heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. "Julian won't believe you." "Julian doesn't need to," Vanessa replied. "But his mother? The board? Investors?" She leaned back, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "You know how this works, darling. It's not about truth. It's about narrative." Sophia sat in silence for a long moment. She thought of her baby, her tiny, growing child, and then she smiled, soft but unyielding. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I'll stay." Vanessa blinked. "I'm not here to compete with you," Sophia continued. "But I won't run either. Not anymore." For the first time, Vanessa looked caught off guard. "You're making a mistake." Sophia stood, collecting her purse with quiet elegance. "No. I'm finally making a choice." Back at Kingsley Tower, Sophia stepped out of the elevator feeling 1,000 pounds lighter and twice as exhausted. She passed Julian's office and stopped. The door was slightly ajar. His voice carried out, "No, Mother. I told you I'm not discussing Vanessa again." Sophia froze. Eleanor Kingsley's voice was clipped and cold. "You're being irrational. The Sterlings are powerful allies. This isn't just about you, Julian. I'm not marrying someone I don't care about. She's perfect for the family. I'm not interested in a merger disguised as a wedding." Eleanor scoffed. "And what? You'll choose that Lane girl instead?" "The entire board will revolt if you humiliate the Sterlings." Sophia's breath caught. Julian's reply came low, firm. "I don't care what they say. She's not going anywhere." Sophia's eyes widened. Eleanor's voice turned icy. "Then you'll lose everything." "Oppose. I'd rather lose the board than lose her," Julian said. Sophia took one step back, heart hammering against her ribs. She had come back from lunch, determined to be strong, independent, ready to fight alone. And then she'd overheard the one thing she hadn't expected. Julian Kingsley was fighting for her. Sophia slipped away from the office door before Julian or Eleanor could notice her. Her heels were silent against the carpet as she made her way to the break room, seeking temporary refuge and a moment to breathe. Her pulse still thundered in her ears. He said he'd rather lose the board than lose me. The words had hit harder than anything Vanessa had thrown at her. She didn't know what shook her more. The fact that Julian had stood up for her, or the fact that she still didn't know what he truly felt. Was it love? Guilt? A protective impulse? Or something more complicated? Something even he hadn't yet named? She sank onto one of the lounge chairs and placed a protective hand over her stomach. "Your dad is either an idiot," she whispered with a soft smile, "or he's trying really hard not to be one." Just then, the door opened, and the idiot in question walked in. Julian paused when he saw her, his expression unreadable. "I was just looking for you." Sophia raised an eyebrow, schooling her features. "Is everything okay?" He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "My mother told me Vanessa invited you to lunch." Sophia gave a nonchalant shrug. "She did." Julian frowned. "You went?" She was very persuasive, she said dryly. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "What did she say to you?" Sophia didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him carefully at the way his shoulders were slightly tense, the way his hands clenched, as if expecting the worst. Finally, she said, "She offered me money to resign." Julian's expression darkened. "She did what?" "She wanted me gone," Sophia said, a faint edge creeping into her voice now. "She said I was in her way." His voice dropped into something gravelly. "You're not." "I know." He blinked, caught off guard by her simple confidence. "And I said no," she added, "because I'm not running anymore, Julian. Not from Vanessa. Not from your mother. Not even from you." He stepped closer, eyes searching hers. "Why?" Sophia stood slowly, facing him squarely. "Because I have something to protect now. And I don't mean this job." For a brief second, he looked at her as if he almost understood. Almost. His eyes softened. "I'm sorry." She blinked. "For what?" "For letting them treat you like that. For not defending you sooner. For believing what they said about you." Sophia felt the lump in her throat rise. She had waited 3 years to hear those words. And now that they had come, they felt too tender to touch. "You've always been difficult to read," Julian continued. "You never explained why you really wanted this job. Why you worked so hard. Why you stayed." "Because this was all I had," she admitted quietly. "No family. No connections. Just this chance." Julian's brows furrowed. "You're the most capable person in this building. You earned everything on your own." She gave a sad smile. "Tell that to your mother." "I will," he said. "Again and again. If I have to." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the walls between them didn't just crack, they shattered. Julian leaned forward, reaching up to brush a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered. "Sophia," he murmured, "do you know what it does to me? Seeing you walk past me every day like we're strangers?" Her breath caught. "I remember everything about that night," he continued. "The way you looked at me, the way you touched me. You weren't pretending, were you?" She shook her head, eyes shimmering. "No, I wasn't pretending." "And now?" Sophia's lips parted, the truth trembling on the edge. But then her phone buzzed sharply in her purse, and the moment snapped like glass. She turned away, exhaling. "I should get back to work." Julian didn't stop her, but as she walked to the door, he called after her, "Sophia." She turned. His voice was low. "Whatever happens next, I'm not letting you go." She didn't respond, but the smile on her lips as she left said everything. That night, Sophia stood in her apartment, staring at a drawer full of tiny socks and onesies she'd purchased on impulse. A future once so terrifying now glimmered with something new. Possibility. And for the first time since she saw those 2 pink lines, she no longer felt alone. Chapter 4. Storms of the Heart. The storm arrived suddenly that Monday afternoon, not just outside, but within the pristine glass walls of Kingsley Tower, Rain battered the windows like a warning. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but inside Julian Kingsley's office, the real tempest was brewing. Sophia had been fielding back-to-back calls when the silence struck her. Julian's voice, which usually rang through the intercom with steady commands, had been absent for over an hour. Unusual. She glanced at the clock, 2:43 p.m. He hasn't emailed since noon. With a growing sense of unease, Sophia walked toward his office and knocked once. No answer. "Mr. Kingsley?" she called softly. Still nothing. She opened the door carefully, her heart lurching when she spotted him slumped over his desk, one hand gripping his abdomen. "Julian!" she cried, rushing forward. He looked up weakly, his skin pale and clammy, sweat soaking through his dress shirt. "Don't. Call an ambulance." "I'm fine." She ignored him entirely, already dialing. 3 hours later, Sophia sat beside his hospital bed, arms crossed tightly across her chest, heart still pounding. Perforated stomach lining. Internal bleeding. Severe ulcer due to stress, overwork, and skipped meals. She had known he worked too hard, but she hadn't known it had gotten this bad. He stirred, groaning lightly as his lashes fluttered open. "You're in the hospital," she said softly. "You collapsed." He winced. "You called them." "Of course I did." Julian looked at her, then truly looked, and something raw flickered in his eyes. "You stayed. I wasn't going to leave you like that." He swallowed. "Thank you." Sophia nodded. "You're lucky. The doctor said if you waited another hour, you might not have made it." He chuckled weakly. "I never do things halfway." She rolled her eyes. Stupid. His lips twitched. Still smarter than most people, and yet dumb enough to ignore abdominal pain for a week. Silence settled between them, charged with unspoken truths. Then he whispered, "I didn't want to worry you." Her breath caught. "Worry me? Why would he think she?" Julian turned his head toward her, eyes gentle despite the pain etched into his face. "Sophia, when you were gone for lunch the other day, I thought you were quitting." "I almost did," she confessed, voice low. "Why didn't you?" She looked away, her hand instinctively drifting to her belly. "Because there's more at stake now." Julian watched her carefully, as if reading the spaces between her words. Sophia cleared her throat. "You should rest." He didn't argue. His eyelids drooped again, and she stayed by his side long after the nurses dimmed the lights, listening to the beep of the monitor and the rhythm of her own beating heart. The next morning, Eleanor Kingsley arrived at the hospital like a storm wrapped in pearls. Sophia stood as soon as she saw her in the hallway. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You're still here?" "He needed someone last night," Sophia replied, steady despite the ice in her veins. "He has a family for that." "He didn't ask for them," Sophia said calmly. "He asked for me." Eleanor's lips thinned. "You've manipulated him long enough." "I haven't manipulated anyone." Eleanor stepped closer, her voice sharp. "You think you're irreplaceable? Don't flatter yourself." "I don't," Sophia said, meeting her gaze. "But I also know he doesn't need someone else deciding what or who he needs." Eleanor's eyes flared. At that moment, the doctor approached. "Mrs. Kingsley, I'd like a word about your son's treatment plan." Eleanor gave Sophia one last look before following the doctor down the hall. Sophia exhaled slowly. Her hand pressed over her heart. It was becoming clearer by the day. The war wasn't just between her and Julian's past, but between love and legacy, between a family who believed power should dictate affection, and a man who might finally be learning to feel. That afternoon, Julian woke to find Sophia asleep in the chair beside him, her head resting on the armrest, one hand loosely curled near his own. He studied her quietly, fully for the first time. How had he ever thought her manipulative? She was a fortress of resilience, wrapped in soft smiles and quiet sarcasm. She worked harder than anyone, took less credit than she deserved, and never once demanded anything from him, even when he gave her nothing but suspicion in return. He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. She stirred. "You're awake. Have you been here all day?" She nodded sleepily. "You scared me, Julian." His throat tightened. "I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Julian squeezed her hand. Then don't leave. She blinked. He continued, voice hoarse. Whatever you're not telling me, I want to know. Not just because I care, because I need to. Sophia stared at him, the weight of everything she'd hidden pressing down on her like a tidal wave. The truth was on the tip of her tongue. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed violently on the table. She frowned, glancing at the screen. Blocked number. A chill crept down her spine. She picked it up. Hello? There was silence. Then a woman's voice, distorted but unmistakably malicious, whispered, Tell Julian goodbye. You won't see him again. Sophia froze. The line went dead. Sophia stood motionless, phone clutched tightly in her hand, heart pounding in her ears. Julian noticed the change in her face immediately. What is it? She tried to hide the tremor in her voice. Wrong number. He sat up straighter despite the pain. Sophia. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because that voice, distorted as it was, had chilled her to the bone. And while she had no concrete proof, deep down, she knew exactly who it was. Vanessa Sterling. Julian watched her carefully. You're not okay. Sophia attempted a smile. You're the one in a hospital bed, Julian. And you're visibly shaking. I'm just tired, she said, trying to sound casual and hungry. I think I'll grab something from the cafeteria. Before he could argue, she squeezed his hand gently. Rest. I'll be back. Then she turned and walked out with practiced calm, while 100 storm clouds churned in her chest. Sophia stood in the hospital lobby, fingers trembling as she redialed the blocked number, straight to voicemail. She took a shaky breath. Was it just a scare tactic? A threat to rattle me? She had dealt with bullies her whole life. But this was something new. Something sinister. The venom in that voice wasn't jealousy, it was obsession. Control. And Vanessa Sterling was no longer simply trying to ruin her reputation. She was trying to make her disappear. Sophia pressed a protective hand to her abdomen. No. Not this time. I won't let her take this away from me. That evening, Julian stirred again to find his room empty. Panic gripped his chest. Where was she? He reached for the call button, but stopped when the door opened, revealing, not Sophia, but Isabel, his second in command and oldest confidante. Hey, she said gently, placing a bouquet of fresh orchids on the side table. Julian frowned. What are you doing here? Isabel crossed her arms. You didn't think your beta would show up after your emergency hospitalization? He sighed. I'm fine. Liar, she said. Then she paused. I saw Sophia on the way in. She looked, shaken. Julian's brows drew together. Did she say anything? No. But I've worked with you two for years, Julian. Something's different. And if you hurt her— I didn't, he said quickly, then looked down. Not today, anyway. Isabel tilted her head. You love her. Julian didn't deny it. She nodded. Then protect her. Julian looked out the window, rain still streaking the glass. I intend to. Later that night, Sophia returned to his room. She looked composed again, but Julian saw past it. Sophia. She smiled. How's your pain? Manageable. He reached for her hand. What happened earlier? She hesitated, then said quietly, Someone called me. Threatened you. Julian's eyes darkened. Who? I don't know. But I have a guess. Vanessa. Sophia nodded slowly. Julian's voice turned to steel. She crossed a line. I can handle it, Sophia said. I always have. You don't have to anymore. She turned to look at him, something fragile and astonished in her eyes. Julian cupped her hand in both of his. I've treated you unfairly for years. Pushed you away. Assumed the worst when all you ever did was protect your dignity. I wasn't perfect either, she murmured. He shook his head. Don't minimize what you've been through. What you've done for this company. For me? Then, softly. And now you're in danger because of me. I'm not leaving, she said firmly. Not until you're safe, too. Julian's heart clenched. Then let me do something for you. Please. Sophia hesitated, then spoke so softly he almost missed it. "I'm pregnant, Julian." Silence. He froze, eyes searching hers. "What?" "I found out last week. It's yours." 5 weeks now. Julian's lips parted. The breath left his lungs. He sat back slowly, as if trying to absorb the magnitude of her words. Then, instead of panic or disbelief, something else washed over his features. Awe. Tenderness. And then something that looked a lot like love. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought you'd hate me for it. That you'd think I was trying to trap you." Julian shook his head. "You've never been the trap, Sophia. I was the fool too blind to see what I had." A tear slipped down her cheek. Julian reached up and wiped it away gently. "I'm not going anywhere. You and the baby, you're mine now. And I'll protect both of you, even if it means burning the whole damn boardroom down." Sophia laughed through her tears. "That's the most romantic threat I've ever heard." He smiled, leaning forward to rest his forehead against hers. "Then stay, Sophia. Stay with me." She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, the storm inside her began to quiet. Chapter 5. Shadows Behind the Spotlight. The press conference was supposed to be routine. Julian had insisted on returning to Kingsley Tower only days after being discharged. He looked immaculate in a charcoal 3-piece suit, his expression unreadable behind his signature stoicism. Only Sophia could see the subtle signs, how he kept one hand pressed to his stomach now and then, or how he gritted his jaw when the lights grew too bright. She stood off stage, just behind the curtain, hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach. 5.5 weeks. She hadn't told anyone else yet. And for now, she preferred it that way. Sophia's eyes scanned the room beyond the curtain. Investors. Executives. Reporters. And her breath caught Vanessa Sterling, seated in the second row, lips painted the same cruel red as always. Beside her, Sabrina Voss, PR director of Sterling Holdings and Vanessa's lifelong best friend, and co-conspirator in every venom-laced whisper Sophia had endured over the past 3 years. Sophia stepped back instinctively. They knew. No one had said it. No message had come. But she could feel it. She had seen it in the way Vanessa's lips curled as their eyes met, like a wolf who smelled blood. After the conference, Julian found Sophia waiting for him in the executive lounge. "You did well," she said, her voice soft, her fingers brushing his as he walked past. He sat heavily on the couch, leaning back, the stress of the spotlight finally draining from his posture. "You okay?" "I should be asking you that," she replied, sitting beside him. "I'm better when you're around," he said, then smirked. "Even if you micromanage me more than the nurses did." She gave him a light shove. "Someone has to." They both laughed softly. But then her face sobered. "Julian, I think Vanessa and Sabrina know." "About the baby." His expression changed immediately, sharp, alert. "What makes you say that?" They were at the press conference, both of them. "Vanessa kept staring like she wanted to peel my skin off. I should have had them removed. She hasn't done anything. Yet. But something's coming. I can feel it." Julian's jaw locked. "Let them come. They won't get past me." Sophia hesitated. "They're more dangerous than you think." He turned to her. "And I'm more ruthless than they remember." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You're not fighting this alone anymore." But despite Julian's words, the next attack came when he wasn't looking. It was subtle, deceptive, but unmistakable. The first was a leak, a tabloid article with the headline, "CEO Julian Kingsley's secretary in secret affair she planned it, claims anonymous source." It ran the next morning, complete with blurry long-lens photos of Sophia helping Julian into his car after his hospitalization. They'd made it look illicit, suggestive. The comments section was a sewer of misogyny and conspiracies. Julian stormed into the PR department the minute he saw it. "Pull every connection you have," he snapped. "Find out who leaked this and bury them." Sophia tried to stay calm, to pretend it didn't matter, but her fingers trembled on her keyboard. The shame was like old soot, clinging to her skin. But that wasn't the end. Later that evening, as she stepped outside the building toward her car, A black SUV screeched to a halt across the street. Sophia froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then the window rolled down just enough for her to glimpse Sabrina's face smiling, mocking. Sophia's hand flew to her stomach protectively. And then the SUV sped away. Inside the office, Julian could sense something was wrong the moment Sophia returned. "You're pale." "Just tired," she murmured, sitting down stiffly. He came around her desk and crouched beside her chair. "Talk to me." She looked at him, eyes wide. "I think they're watching me now." Julian's expression darkened. "That's it. I'm increasing your security." "I'm not a prisoner, Julian." "No," he said. "You're the mother of my child. And the woman I—" He stopped. But the words hung there, suspended between them. Sophia's lips parted. "Say it." He swallowed hard. "The woman I love." The silence after felt like a held breath. Sophia's eyes filled, her voice barely above a whisper. "I love you too." And in the middle of all the darkness, the headlines, the threats, there it was. A quiet, unshakable truth. Later that night, Sophia stood in her apartment, packing an overnight bag. Julian had insisted she stay at his penthouse. "It's more secure," he said. And she hadn't fought him. Not after what she saw in Sabrina's eyes. She paused in front of her bathroom mirror, one hand on her belly. "He loves you," she whispered. "He loves both of us." But across town, in a luxury hotel suite laced with shadows, Vanessa Sterling poured herself a glass of wine. Sabrina lounged on the velvet chaise, legs crossed. She looked scared today. Vanessa's smile was a blade. She should be. She won't back off. She won't have a choice. Vanessa raised her glass. To tomorrow. It happened in the quiet between seconds. Sophia stepped out of the Kingsley Tower underground parking lot the next morning, key fob in hand, thinking about nursery color palettes and salmon cravings. She never saw the van coming. A blur of movement. A sting of something sharp against her neck. Then darkness. Julian was reviewing market projections when Isabel burst into his office. "Where's Sophia?" He looked up, startled. "She's supposed to be home." "Why?" "She's not answering her phone. Her GPS signal gone." Julian shot to his feet. "Gone?" Isabel handed him a tablet, the last pinged location marked just outside the tower. Julian's blood turned to ice. "Call security. Pull footage. I want every license plate within a 2-block radius from the last hour." "Already done," Isabel said, pulling out her phone. Julian grabbed his coat. "I'm going down there." "Julian." "She's pregnant. She's in danger. And I swore I'd protect her." He was gone before Isabel could stop him. Sophia awoke in darkness. Her head throbbed. The room was cold, sterile, and unfamiliar. Cement floor. Bare walls. The only light came from a flickering bulb overhead. She was tied to a chair. Her breath caught. And then Vanessa Sterling stepped from the shadows. "Well, well," she purred. "Sleeping Beauty finally wakes." Sophia's voice was hoarse. "You're insane." "Maybe," Vanessa said, circling her like a shark. "But you're the one tied to a chair, darling. What do you want?" "Your disappearance. Quiet. Elegant. Just long enough for Julian to marry me and forget this little rebellion of his." Sophia clenched her jaw. "He'll never forget me." Vanessa leaned in, her voice a hiss. "Then maybe I'll make sure there's nothing left to remember." Sabrina appeared in the doorway. "We have a problem." Vanessa turned. "What?" "Julian. He's traced the van. Julian was a man possessed. Security teams, private investigators, and ex-military contractors were all on his payroll. And now they were deployed like a personal army. Within an hour, they had tracked the van to an abandoned Sterling warehouse on the Hudson. Julian drove himself, ignoring every protocol. He stormed the rusted door alone. Inside, the building was dim, echoing. He heard voices. Then, Sophia. A muffled cry. He followed it, boots pounding on metal and concrete, and then he saw her. Teed. Bruised. Alive. Sophia. Vanessa turned, startled. just as Julian tackled her to the ground. Sabrina lunged but was intercepted by two of Julian's guards pouring in behind him. Chows erupted. Julian ripped the tape from Sophia's wrists and cupped her face. "Are you okay? Did they?" "I'm fine," she gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You found me." "Always," he whispered. "I'll always find you." The ambulance ride was a blur. Sophia clung to his hand while medics checked her vitals. Julian never let go, not for a second. When they arrived at the hospital, the staff ushered her into a private room. Isabel was already there, coordinating security and press suppression. "I'm so sorry," she said, eyes shimmering. "We should have predicted they'd go this far." "They're done," Julian said coldly. "I'll make sure neither Vanessa nor Sabrina comes near her again." "And the baby?" Isabel asked softly. Sophia nodded, voice steady. "He's okay. I felt him kick." Julian blinked. "Him?" She gave him a teary smile. "You're going to have a son." Something broke in him, something cold and hidden. Julian dropped to his knees beside the bed and pressed his forehead gently against her belly. "I failed you once," he whispered. "Never again." Sophia ran her fingers through his hair, heart full. "We're okay now." And for the first time in weeks, the fear began to fade. That night, Vanessa and Sabrina were arrested. Charges included attempted abduction, conspiracy, and corporate sabotage. The Sterling family disowned them both within 24 hours, distancing themselves from the scandal with cold efficiency. Their names were stripped from Business Network, their invitations revoked. Sophia Lane had survived and won. 2 days later, Julian stood before a stunned boardroom and announced calmly, "Sophia Lane is the mother of my child. We are engaged. And this company will respect her." Silence. Then, slowly, knots. Agreement. Eleanor Kingsley rose at the end of the table. She walked over to Sophia, who stood near the door, hands resting on her bump. Eleanor studied her carefully, then offered a small, trembling smile. "Welcome to the family." Sophia exhaled, and Julian took her hand in his, warm and solid and real. Chapter 6. His name is Liam. The first time Julian Kingsley heard his son's heartbeat, he forgot how to breathe. The rhythmic, galloping thump, thump, thump filled the room like a war drum and a lullaby all at once. He sat frozen beside Sophia, staring at the monitor as if it were a miracle which, to him, it was. Sophia turned her head to look at him, her eyes sparkling with laughter. "You look like someone just punched you." "I think they did," he murmured. "Right in the chest." She chuckled, reaching for his hand. The ultrasound tech smiled politely, unaware of the battlefield of emotions warring inside Julian's usually unreadable expression. "Everything looks great. He's growing strong." Sophia nodded. "Thank you." As the nurse left the room, Julian sat quietly, his thumb gently brushing over the back of Sophia's hand. "I still can't believe it," he said finally. Sophia squeezed his fingers. "Neither can I. But he's real." Julian exhaled, eyes fixed on the small black and white photo the technician had handed them. "He's mine." Sophia arched a brow. "Half mina too, remember." He gave a sheepish smile, then leaned over to press a kiss against her temple. "Mine, ours," he thought. "My family." The following week, Sophia officially moved into Julian's penthouse. It was sleek, modern, and meticulously organized, the physical embodiment of Julian's carefully structured life. But Sophia's presence brought a softness to it almost immediately. A vase of wildflowers on the marble kitchen island, a baby book, half read on the living room couch, mismatched slippers near the doorway, the scent of cinnamon and chamomile from the tea she liked to brew in the evenings. Julian watched all these small invasions with something akin to reverence. "You've domesticated me," he muttered one night as she folded a miniature onesie on the bed. She smirked. "Don't give me so much credit. You still bark at the stock market like it's a sentient being." He pulled her into his arms from behind, hands gently cradling her growing bump. "I'll bark less if you promise to keep filling this place with things that smell like you." She turned, resting her head against his chest. "Like tea and baby powder? Like home," he whispered. Sophia's heart skipped. One evening, they sat on the floor of the future nursery, surrounded by paint samples. Gray or sage green? Sophia asked, holding up 2 swatches. Julian tilted his head. Which one is supposed to make him smarter? She rolled her eyes. That's not how colors work. Well, then sage, he said decisively. It reminds me of you. Why? It's soft. And strong. And hard to define. Sophia stared at him, heart fluttering. He blinked. Too poetic? No, she said softly. Just perfect. He smiled, then pointed at a wooden cradle near the wall. That came today. She glanced over and ran her hand over the polished edge. Where did you find something so beautiful? It was mine, he said. My mother kept it in storage. Sophia's breath caught. You saved it. I asked Eleanor to find it. I wanted him to have something connected. Her eyes shimmered. He'll love it. Julian crouched down and touched the edge of the cradle, his voice low. I want to be the kind of father he's proud of. You already are. At 30 weeks, they finally chose a name. They were sitting on the balcony at sunset, wrapped in a fleece blanket, her head on his shoulder. What about Alexander? Julian offered. Sophia shook her head. Too regal. He's going to be grounded, like us. Julian smirked. We are the definition of drama, Sophia. She grinned. True. What about Liam? Sophia sat up a little. Liam. Julian watched her face. You like it. It's warm. Gentle. But strong. Like his mother. She smiled at him, then whispered. His name is Liam. Julian reached over and placed a hand on her belly. Hello, Liam, he said quietly. I'm your dad. I used to be the kind of man who only spoke in numbers and emails. But you and your mom, you've made me want to speak in lullabies. Sophia swallowed back the lump in her throat. Julian Metterhaze. I want him to grow up knowing what love feels like. What safety feels like. What it means to be chosen. He will, she said, voice trembling, because he'll have you. And you, Julian whispered, kissing her forehead. Always. But happiness, as always, existed in a delicate balance. The very next day, Sophia received a letter. Anonymously mailed. No return address. Inside was a photograph, grainy, zoomed, but unmistakable. Her and Julian kissing on the hospital balcony, and a typed note. You may have won the battle. But the war isn't over. Sophia stared at it, hands trembling. She wasn't afraid for herself anymore. But for Liam? For Julian? For the fragile family they were building? She'd fight anything to protect it. Even ghosts who refused to vanish. Julian's hands trembled slightly as he read the letter. He sat at the edge of the bed, the photo and note laid out beside him like pieces of a crime scene. The picture showed too much. His arms wrapped tightly around Sophia, her hand on his cheek, lips pressed together in a moment too private for the world. He had never imagined their love would be weaponized. Sophia stood near the window, arms folded tightly over her belly. What do we do? Julian's jaw flexed. We fight back. She looked at him. How? We take control of the story, he said. We won't hide anymore. No more silence. No more pretending. He rose and walked over to her, his hands cupping her shoulders gently. I want the world to know I chose you. Sophia blinked up at him, uncertain. But the board, the media. Let them watch, he said softly. Let them know the truth. That Julian Kingsley doesn't bow to threats. She stared at him, then slowly nodded. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about Liam, about building a life he could be proud of. The next morning, a statement was released by Kingsley Group's official media team. It was clear, direct. Unapologetics. Julian Kingsley, CEO of Kingsley Group, and Sophia Lane, Executive Secretary, are expecting their first child and are engaged to be married. This is a private matter, and the company will not tolerate harassment or malicious speculation. The response was swift and divided. Some media outlets praised Julian's honesty. Others spun headlines about office romances and power imbalances. But none could deny one thing, his devotion. Photos of him holding Sophia's hand, guiding her gently through security lines, helping her into his car, all of it painted a different image. Not scandal. Family. A week later, Sophia stood in a pale pink maternity dress, framed in the soft light of Julian's private garden. She was surrounded by delicate floral arrangements and a small group of trusted friends and staff, including Isabel, who insisted on organizing the impromptu engagement celebration herself. Julian raised a glass. To the strongest woman I've ever known. Sophia blushed. You're just saying that because I haven't made you paint the nursery again. Everyone laughed. He continued. Sophia Lane walked into my life 3 years ago and wrecked every plan I thought I had. And I'm grateful every day she did. Sophia's eyes shimmered. Julian reached for her hand. And to our son Liam, may he inherit her courage, and hopefully not my temper. Isabel raised her glass. To new beginnings. As glasses clinked and soft music played, Sophia leaned into Julian's side, contentment warming her chest. For the first time in a long time, the future felt safe. That night, they lay in bed beneath soft white sheets, the moonlight pooling across the room like spilled milk. Julian lay on his side, hand resting over her bump, thumb tracing small, absent-minded circles. Do you think he'll look like you? Sophia whispered. I hope so, Julian said. But with your eyes, definitely your eyes. Sophia smiled. I just hope he's kind. He will be, Julian said confidently. Because we'll show him how. She turned toward him. You know. You've changed. He smirked. Less grumpy? Much less terrifying. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. You changed me. Her breath caught. Before you, I lived for the company, he whispered. Now, I live for you. For Liam. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and unbidden. You're everything I never dared to want, she whispered. Everything I needed. And in that moonlit stillness, they kissed slow and full of promise. The next morning brought a package. No return address. Julian opened it. Inside was a small plush rabbit. And a note. Children are fragile things. Best keep them away from fire. Sophia froze as she read it. Julian crumpled the note, fury lighting in his eyes. Enough is enough, he said. I'm ending this. She grabbed his arm. Julian. But he was already pulling out his phone. I'm not waiting for another threat. I want a full investigation. Background checks. Phone records. Security sweep of the building and every person who's had contact with Sophia. He turned to her, voice low. No one touches my family again. Ever. Sophia saw it in his eyes. He meant it. The cold CEO she once feared had become the fiercest protector she'd ever known. Later that day, as Sophia sat in the nursery, folding baby clothes, she felt a flutter. She paused. Then again stronger this time. A tiny kick. She gasped. Julian. He came running, panic on his face. What? What's wrong? She grabbed his hand and placed it over her belly. Then kick. His eyes widened. That was? She nodded, smiling through tears. Your son. Saying hello. Julian dropped to his knees, resting his head gently against her bump. Hi, Liam, he whispered, voice thick. I can't wait to meet you. And in that quiet moment, amid folded onesies and fear-laced love, Sophia realized something. No matter what shadows lingered, she was no longer afraid. Chapter 7. A family made, not born. Sophia had never stepped foot inside the Kingsley family estate until now. The massive stone manor in Connecticut loomed like something out of a historical novel. Old money, imposing architecture, and a chill that seemed to seep into the bones. Ivy crawled up the outer walls like time itself clinging on, and the windows gleamed with calculated precision. As the black sedan pulled up to the entrance, Sophia took a deep breath. Julian reached over and took her hand. You don't have to do this. She met his eyes. Yes, I do. For Liam. Julian nodded slowly. I'll be right next to you. Eleanor Kingsley greeted them in the drawing room, sitting like a queen in her cream silk suit, a delicate china teacup in hand. Julian. Sophia, she said, with the same cool tone she might have used to acknowledge a distant acquaintance. Mother, Julian replied curtly. Sophia stood tall, her maternity dress flowing softly around her form. Eleanor's eyes flicked briefly to the bump before returning to her son. To what do I owe this royal visit? Julian didn't bother with niceties. You sent the plush rabbit. Eleanor's eyebrow arched, not missing a beat. I have no idea what you're talking about. Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but laced with steel. Vanessa and Sabrina are finished. I've made sure of it. But if I find out you're continuing their crusade against Sophia or my son, I will sever every tie to this family, including the board seats and the Kingsley name. Eleanor didn't flinch. You would tarnish generations of legacy over this? Sophia took a slow breath and stepped forward. Legacy is only worth protecting if it isn't built on cruelty. The silence in the room became suffocating. Eleanor set her teacup down with a quiet clink. I didn't raise you to be reckless, Julian. No, he said. You raised me to be alone. But I'm not anymore. He turned to Sophia, his hand finding hers again. We're building something better. A family that chooses each other, that loves, that protects. Eleanor looked at them for a long moment. Then her gaze softened, just barely. I see, she said. Sophia didn't know what to make of it. Not approval. No defection. But maybe, just maybe, a sliver of reluctant respect. On the way back to Manhattan, Julian was uncharacteristically quiet, his gaze fixed on the highway ahead. Sophia leaned her head against the window. Do you think she'll stop? He let out a slow breath. No, but it doesn't matter. She doesn't control me anymore. She turned to him, hand resting gently on his knee. That took guts. He glanced at her, his eyes tired but clear. You gave me that. Sophia smiled. We gave each other strength. Back at the penthouse, Sophia busied herself in the nursery while Julian handled work calls in his home office. She ran her fingers over the edge of Liam's crib, letting the quiet of the room settle around her like a warm blanket. The soft sage-green walls, the stenciled stars on the ceiling, the mobile Julian had spent 3 hours assembling all of it, made the space feel real, safe. Suddenly, a soft knock came from the doorway. Julian stood there, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the man she'd fallen for, minus the sharp edges. I canceled the rest of my day, he said. Wanted to spend the afternoon with you. Sophia smiled. You're spoiling me. I intend to, he said, walking in. You're carrying my legacy now. She turned sharply. Don't say that. He blinked. What? I'm not just a vessel for your legacy, Julian. He frowned, stepping closer. That's not what I meant. Sophia held up a hand gently. I know, but I need you to hear this. I've spent my whole life fighting to prove I'm more than a background character in other people's stories. I fought my way into this company, into independence, into survival. He looked stricken, ashamed. Sophia, I didn't mean to. She shook her head. I know you didn't, but I need to feel like your partner, not a piece of your empire. Julian reached out slowly, placing both hands on her cheeks. You're not a piece of anything. You're the heart of it. Of me. Tears welled in her eyes. I see you, Sophia Lane, he whispered. Independent. Fierce. Capable. And I thank God every day you chose me, even when I didn't deserve it. Her tears fell freely now. That's all I ever needed to hear. He kissed her then, deep and soft, his forehead pressed against hers as they stood in the nursery. Not a legacy inherited, but a family chosen. That evening, they sat together on the living room floor, sorting through childhood photos Julian's mother had reluctantly sent after their visit. Sophia held one up Julian at age 6, in a tiny gray suit, looking grumpy next to a Christmas tree. You were a grumpy elf, she teased. I was miserable, Julian admitted. All I wanted was a Lego spaceship. I got a fountain pen. She laughed, then grew serious. We'll give Liam better. We already are, Julian said, laying a photo in her lap. Starting with you. She picked it up. It was a picture of her, one Julian had taken secretly, weeks ago. She was holding a baby sock and smiling down at her belly. Beneath it, he had written in small, careful print, "The woman who made me human." Sophia stared at the photo in her lap. The woman who made me human. The words seemed too intimate to speak aloud, too precious to hold without trembling fingers. Her eyes blurred as she traced the lettering with her thumb. It was strange how someone like Julian, who once seemed to operate entirely in spreadsheets and silence, had learned to say the things she'd always longed to hear, and mean them. He was watching her, quiet and patient, the way he often did now. Not demanding, not prodding. Just there. "I've been thinking," she said at last, lifting her gaze. "After Liam's born, I want to start my own line." Julian's eyes lit up. "Fashion? For children," she said. "Affordable, comfortable, stylish. There are so many over-designed, overpriced brands out there. I want to make something joyful and practical. Something real." He nodded slowly, pride flickering in his features. "You'd be brilliant at it." Her eyes searched his. "Really? You're not just saying that because I'm pregnant with your son." He chuckled. "No. Though that does give you a powerful advantage in this household." Sophia laughed. Then Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'll support you however you need. Funding, PR, partnerships. Name it. I don't want it handed to me," she said quickly. "I want to build it." "I know." His voice softened. "But I also want to be the kind of man who lifts you, not one you have to climb over." Sophia's throat tightened. "We'll do it together." Julian smiled. "That's all I want." The next morning, Sophia met with a boutique consultant Julian introduced her to on her own terms. No branding under Kingsley, no Kingsley investors. Just Sophia Lane, a passionate woman with sketches and a business plan she'd worked on since her early 20s. By the end of the week, she'd chosen a name, Liam and Little. And when Julian saw the logo mock up a tiny handprint inside a heart, he'd stood in silence for several moments before pulling her into the gentlest hug she'd ever felt from him. That weekend, they escaped the city. Julian had arranged for a quiet cabin on a hilltop overlooking a lake, far from flashing cameras and boardroom agendas. There was a fire crackling in the hearth, a downy rug beneath their feet, and mist curling across the windows like lazy brushstrokes. They spent most of Saturday curled up together, Julian reading aloud from a parenting book with dramatic flair, and Sophia feeding him roasted marshmallows. "You're going to be a chaotic dad," she said, giggling. Julian gave her an exaggeratedly offended look. "I will be structured. Stern. Possibly feared. You'll be wrapped around his tiny sock-covered finger before he's a week old." He shrugged, unconcerned. "He'll be Elaine at heart. There's no hope for me." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Julian brought her outside to the edge of the dock. The lake shimmered with orange and lavender hues, the air crisp with early autumn. Sophia stood barefoot, one hand on her belly, the other wrapped in his. "I've never felt this peaceful," she murmured. Julian looked at her. "Me either." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. Her heart stopped. It was a ring box. Sophia froze. "Julian." He opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, platinum, with a pear-shaped diamond and 2 tiny emerald leaves on each side. Understated. Unique. Perfect. He didn't kneel. Instead, he stood before her, hands slightly trembling, eyes brighter than she'd ever seen. "I don't have the right words," he began. "Not the way you do. But I know this. I want to be yours. Not just in the way that shows up on paperwork or press releases. In the real way." Her breath caught. "I want to wake up with you. Laugh with you. Build your business beside mine. Cry when Liam takes his first steps. Argue about which kindergarten he goes to. Grow old enough that we both complain about our backs while drinking terrible tea in rocking chairs." She laughed, tears rising. "I don't just love you, Sophia," he said. "You are the life I want." He held out the box. "Will you marry me?" She blinked through the tears, nodding even before her voice returned. "Yes. God, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. So did she when he pulled her into his arms and kissed her beneath the fading sky, lake glimmering around them like the world itself was holding its breath for their happiness. Later that night, as they lay together by the fire, Sophia traced circles over his bare chest and murmured, "You know, For a man who once called me a manipulative opportunist. You sure are soft. He groaned. Don't bring that up on our engagement night. Too late, she said sweetly. Julian turned to her, mock serious. You did scheme your way into my heart. She kissed the tip of his nose. You were doomed from the start. He smirked, pulling her close. I regret nothing. In the quiet hush of that mountain cabin, beneath layers of warmth and whispered promises, a family that wasn't born of perfection or pedigree began to take root. A family made of choice, of resilience, of love. And it was just getting started. Chapter 8. Breaking Dawn, Breaking Waters. The morning started with waffles. Julian stood in the kitchen of their penthouse, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, brow furrowed in intense concentration as he flipped a golden waffle onto a plate. His cooking, like most things in his life, was done with quiet precision and surprising intensity. Are you trying to bribe our unborn son with maple syrup? Sophia asked, waddling into the kitchen with her 8-month bump leading the way. Julian looked up and grinned. I read that babies respond to sweet flavors in utero. I'm bonding. By giving him a sugar addiction before he's even born? He placed the plate on the table with a flourish. You'll thank me when he comes out asking for waffles instead of world domination. Sophia chuckled and lowered herself carefully into a chair. You are dangerously close to being adorable. Don't ruin my image. But his eyes softened as he sat beside her and placed a gentle hand on her belly. Liam responded with a solid kick. Julian beamed like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. You know, Sophia said, spreading butter over her waffle, I always thought labor would hit like a hurricane. Loud. Dramatic. A big splash. Julian gave her a sideways glance. Is that your not-so-subtle way of saying you're nervous? She looked down at her bump. No. Just. Expectant. Well, he said, kissing her temple, when the storm hits, I'll be your umbrella. It hit later that evening. Sophia had just finished folding the last of Liam's newborn onesies, each one softer and smaller than seemed physically possible, when a sharp, sudden snap of pain gripped her lower back. She gasped, clutching the dresser. Julian, who had just stepped out of the shower, appeared in the doorway a heartbeat later. Sophia? Her eyes were wide. My water just broke. For a second, Julian didn't move. Then he dropped the towel, ran back into the bedroom barefoot, and returned in record time holding their pre-packed hospital bag like it was the final baton in a relay race. Shoes. She barked, breathless. Right. He dropped the bag, ran to grab her sneakers, and knelt to help her put them on, only to tie the laces in frantic double knots. Okay, I have the car. I've got snacks. Your hospital playlist is queued up. Wait, do you need to pee? Should you pee before we leave? Julian. He looked up. Shut up and help me down the stairs. Right. Of course. Focused. Calm. Confident. You're narrating again. Can't help it. Panic has hijacked my brain. The ride to the hospital was part chaos, part comedy. Julian drove like a cautious lunatic, speeding through green lights, but braking 200 feet before every red. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, breathing steadily and glaring at the GPS every time it dared say they were 12 minutes away. Remind me why we didn't move closer to the hospital? She groaned through a contraction. Julian, white-knuckling the steering wheel, replied, Because we loved the skyline views, remember? Damn those romantic sunsets. Julian. Yes? If you rear-end anyone right now, I will personally make sure your son's first word is idiot. Oh. He nodded solemnly. Fair. By the time they reached the hospital, Sophia was breathing in huffs and gripping Julian's hand like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. She was rushed into a delivery room, monitors beeping, nurses flurrying, a doctor introducing herself in calm, practiced tones. Julian never let go of her hand, not through the paperwork, not through the IV line, not through the nurse's comment of, You've got a tough one, Mr. Kingsley. He nodded proudly. I know. Sophia shot him a glare between contractions. This is not the time to brag. Julian kissed her forehead. Remind me later. Hours passed. Labor wasn't the chaotic drama Sophia had imagined. It was harder, monsieur, slower, and somehow more beautiful. Julian sat beside her, hair tousled, eyes red-rimmed, wiping sweat from her brow and whispering encouragement that made her both weep and laugh. "You're doing amazing. You've never looked more powerful. I've never been more in awe of you." At one point, through the haze of pain, she whispered, "I'm scared." Julian pressed his forehead to hers. "Then be scared. I'll be right here." She gripped his shirt, tears falling freely. "Don't leave. I couldn't if I tried." By the time dawn broke, pale gold light spilling across the sky, Sophia's body gave one final push and a wailing cry pierced the air. Julian froze. The nurses were moving, the doctor speaking in calm tones, but all Julian could see was the tiny, slippery, furious miracle held up in gloved hands. Liam. Their son. He was perfect. Red and squalling and real. The nurse asked, "Would Dad like to cut the cord?" Julian stood like a man waking from a dream and moved to do it. Hands steady, heart pounding. And when they placed Liam into Sophia's arms, Julian sat beside her and cried without shame. Because in that moment, everything else, legacy, fear, past, vanished. Only this remained. Family. The hospital room was still. Not silent, but still. Soft beeping from the monitors, gentle swishes of nurses outside, and the delicate sounds of newborn breathing created a rhythm that calmed Sophia's soul in a way she'd never felt before. Liam lay swaddled in her arms, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. His tiny fingers curled like seashells, and his little chest rose and fell with an instinctive will to live that felt nothing short of sacred. Julian sat beside her, barely breathing as he stared at the baby. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this isn't real," he whispered. Sophia turned to him with tired but glowing eyes. "It's real." Julian slowly reached out and touched Liam's hand. Tiny fingers latched around his pinky. He gasped, eyes widening, and then unexpectedly laughed, breathless and stunned. "He's strong." Sophia smiled. "Like his father." Julian met her gaze. Like his mother. They sat in silence, the kind that felt earned, the kind that only came after pain, fear, and something miraculous. Later that morning, a nurse gently knocked and entered with a clipboard. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley." Sophia blinked, surprised. Julian grinned. "That's got a nice ring to it." The nurse chuckled. "Time to officially register your baby's full name." Julian looked at Sophia. "We agreed on Liam, but middle name?" Sophia thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "Liam Julian Lane Kingsley." "Julian Stille. Lane?" Sophia nodded. To remind him, he came from both strength and softness. Julian reached over and kissed her knuckles. "It's perfect." The nurse scribbled on the form, gave them a warm nod, and left. Julian leaned back in his chair, watching his son in quiet awe. "Do you think I'll mess this up?" Sophia tilted her head. "Every parent does. But you'll mess it up with love. And that's the part that matters." He chuckled. "You're too wise for someone who just gave birth to an 8-pound baby. I earned it." That afternoon, Isabel stopped by with a balloon bouquet, an enormous diaper cake, and a suspicious glint in her eye. "I heard you passed out for a moment when the baby came out," she teased Julian. Julian glared. "That's unconfirmed and highly exaggerated." Sophia smirked. "I can confirm it." Isabel grinned. "Well, congratulations. You two did it." Sophia smiled. "No. We did it. You've been there from the start." Isabel gave her a warm hug. "When he starts dating, I reserve the right to be the scary aunt." Julian muttered. "He's not dating until he's 30. Sophia laughed, and Liam let out a tiny squeak in response. Julian looked down. He agrees. That evening, with visitors gone and the room bathed in amber light, Julian held Liam in his arms for the first time while Sophia rested. He moved slowly, carefully, as if handling a treasure that might dissolve if he breathed wrong. Liam opened his eyes gray and stormy, just like his father's. Julian swallowed hard. "Hey, little man," he said softly. "I'm your dad." The words still felt surreal. "I don't have a manual for this. I've never done it before. But I promise you this," he paused, voice trembling. "I will never let you feel alone. Or unloved. Not for a single second." Liam blinked, yawned, and nestled closer. Julian looked over at Sophia, who was half awake, watching with tears in her eyes. "You're already a better man than you ever thought you could be," she whispered. Julian sat beside her, Liam still in his arms, and rested his forehead against hers. "It's because I had someone to show me how." They sat like that for a long time. No fear, no ghosts, no legacy heavy on their shoulders. Just love. Later that night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Julian stood by the window with Liam cradled against his chest. The skyline glittered in the distance, but he wasn't looking at the city. He was looking forward, toward morning feeds, first steps, first words, toward family dinners and bedtime stories and tiny shoes by the front door. He was ready to trade boardrooms for lullabies, ready to give Liam the home he never had. A knock interrupted his thoughts. It was the night nurse. "Mr. Kingsley." He turned. "Just here to take Liam for his newborn tests." Julian hesitated, then kissed Liam's forehead. "I'll be right here." He handed his son over slowly, already missing the warmth in his arms. But when the door closed, he sat back beside Sophia and watched her sleep. His family, his everything. And so, in a quiet hospital room above the city that once only knew him as a cold-hearted CEO, Julian Kingsley became something else entirely. A man remade by love. Chapter 9. Building a world of our own. The first few months passed in a blur of burp cloths, lullabies, and 3 a.m. feedings. Sophia quickly learned how to soothe Liam with one hand and sketch baby rompers with the other. Her days were stitched together with baby giggles, fabric swatches, and long phone calls with local manufacturers. Julian, despite his reputation for dominance in boardrooms, had become a master of diaper changing, though he approached it with the same grave intensity as a hostile merger. "You're folding the tabs unevenly," he muttered one night, brow furrowed as he worked on Liam's chubby waist. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "It's a diaper, Julian, not a quarterly earnings report. I take all responsibilities seriously," he said with a dignified huff. Sophia leaned over and kissed his temple. "Well, CEO of diapers, I need you to test these samples when you're done. My supplier finally got the shipment in." "Julian Sahil, you mean you need me to model baby clothes for Liam again?" She grinned. "Only the rompers. Maybe the hat. Definitely the fox hoodie. I swear this child will sue us for character defamation when he's older." Liam and Little launched quietly on a Monday morning in April. No press fanfare. No big influencers. Just a simple website with a clean design, honest storytelling, and 3 collections that bore Sophia's signature charm: Whimsy Walks, Soft Courage, and Little Kings. Within 48 hours, the site sold out. Emails flooded in. A niche parenting blogger had picked it up and praised the clothes as emotionally intelligent design. Customers shared photos of their babies wearing Liam and Little, tagging Sophia and sharing quotes from her personal introduction. "This is for the child I waited my whole life to meet, and the children out there growing up with nothing but love and resilience in their corner." Julian walked into the nursery mid-afternoon, phone in hand. "You just got your first investor pitch." Sophia looked up from nursing Liam. "Already?" He nodded. "They want to scale you nationwide." She blinked. "Julian, I just wanted to make something real. Something good. I didn't think—" "You made something true," he said. "That's why it worked." Sophia looked down at Liam, who had drifted off to sleep in her arms, mouth still making tiny suckling motions. "Maybe it's enough," she whispered. "To grow it slowly, authentically. I don't want to lose this." Julian came closer, crouching beside her chair. "Then we grow it on your terms. You call the shots." She smiled. "I thought CEOs hated hearing that." He leaned in and kissed her shoulder. "You're the only boss I report to now." But not everything stayed quiet. Kingsley Group had taken a hit during Julian's parental leave, A proxy war in the boardroom, fueled by dissenters who claimed he had become domesticated, distracted, emotional. Eleanor called, sharp as ever. "You're slipping, Julian. The market notices." "I'm not slipping," he replied. "I'm adjusting priorities. To a baby and a woman who almost tore this company apart? To my family," he said firmly. "And I'm not sacrificing them to protect your idea of perfection." Sophia overheard part of the call. She didn't say anything until later, when she found Julian brooding over shareholder reports in his home office. "You don't have to fight her alone." He looked up. "This is my mess." She stepped in, arms crossed. "You think I can't handle her?" He gave her a wry smile. "I think she's afraid of you." "Good. Because I'm not just a mother or your fiancé, Julian. I'm your partner. Let me help." Julian leaned back, thoughtful. "Then marry me now." She blinked. "What?" "Right now. This weekend. No media, no guests. Just us, Liam, and the people who actually matter." Sophia's heart soared. "You really mean it?" He nodded. "I want our son to grow up never questioning who we are, what we chose." She smiled slowly, her fingers tangling with his. "Then let's do it." 3 days later, they stood barefoot in a small sunlit chapel just outside the city. Isabel officiated. Liam slept in a sling against Sophia's chest. Julian wore a pale gray suit, and Sophia glowed in a lace-trimmed ivory dress she had sewn herself, simple and perfect. There were no vows printed, just words spoken from the heart. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed," Sophia said, voice thick with emotion. "You fought for me when I didn't believe I was worth it. And now I'll spend the rest of my life building a world with you for us, and for Liam." Julian's voice cracked. "You saw through everything. The cold, the walls, the scars. And you didn't run. You built a home in my heart and gave me a reason to be better." Isabel wiped a tear as she pronounced them husband and wife. And when Julian kissed her, it wasn't fire, it was warmth. Steady. True. Forever. That evening, they lay on a blanket in a quiet park, stars twinkling above, Liam snuggled between them. "I don't want our life to look perfect," Sophia whispered. Julian turned his head. "No? I want it to be messy. Alive. Honest." He chuckled. "Then we're already succeeding." Sophia smiled, resting her head on his chest. And in the quiet beat of his heart beneath her cheek, she heard the steady rhythm of the life they were building. One choice, one moment, one heartbeat at a time. T began with a headline. Kingsley CEO's wife under scrutiny, Liam and Little, accused of plagiarizing boutique designs. Sophia nearly dropped her phone as she read the article. A whistleblower had come forward, claiming that Liam and Little had stolen designs from another independent brand, one with a small but vocal online following. The accusation was false, of course, but it spread quickly. Blogs picked it up. Parenting forums exploded. Photos were cropped and twisted, details taken out of context. By noon, the company's inbox had over 300 angry emails. By 3, hashtags were trending. Boycott Liam and Little. Kingsley corruption. Baby brand scam. Sophia stared at her computer screen, heart hammering. She knew it wasn't true. Every design, every seam and sketch had come from her own sleepless nights, from memories and dreams and late-night feeding sessions with Liam. But none of that mattered in the court of public opinion. Julian entered the room mid-call and froze when he saw her pale face. "What happened?" She turned the screen toward him. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the page. "This is trash. They're dragging my name," she whispered. "Our name. Liam's name." Julian crossed the room in 3 strides, took her hands in his. "We'll handle this. I don't want to be another headline in your portfolio," she said, voice trembling. "I don't want Liam to grow up thinking his mom is a fraud." Julian's voice was low, steady. "You won't be. Because you're not." By that evening, Julian had mobilized both legal and PR teams. Isabel personally reviewed all public records of Sophia's designs, contracts, and timelines. Within hours, it was clear. The whistleblower was a paid actor hired by a rival brand previously rejected by one of Julian's subsidiaries. By morning, a full legal notice was filed. The media retracted within 24 hours. But the scars lingered. Sophia sat on the nursery floor, arms wrapped around her knees, watching Liam sleep in his crib. "I knew it would happen," she whispered when Julian found her. "I knew the world would try to rip us apart again. I just didn't expect it to hurt so much." Julian sat behind her, pulling her gently into his arms. "You built something beautiful. That threatens people." "I'm just a girl from nowhere," she said, eyes glistening. "They think I don't belong." "Then we'll remind them," he murmured, "that you do." She turned, burying her face into his chest. "I'm so tired of proving myself." Julian's arms tightened. "Then let me do it with you. Every step." 3 days later, Sophia posted a video. No script. No graphics. Just her, sitting in the nursery with Liam in her lap, speaking from the heart. "I know some of you are questioning whether I deserve your trust. I'm not here to beg for it. I'm here to say this: I created Liam and Little not for profit or fame, but because I was a scared new mom who wanted to hold on to something real. I still do. Every stitch, every design, came from love, and I will protect that love, no matter what the world throws at me." The video went viral. Mothers commented in solidarity. Designers came forward to defend her. Former clients of the rival brand revealed similar manipulation. And when Julian reposted it with the caption, "My wife, my strength, my hero," the tide turned. The scandal faded, burned out by truth and tenderness. 1 week later, they sat in the garden of their home, watching Liam gnaw cheerfully on a stuffed fox toy as the late spring sun cast a golden glow over their world. Sophia turned to Julian. "Do you regret any of it?" He looked at her, brow furrowing slightly. "What part? Falling for your secretary? Becoming a tabloid headline? Sharing your kingdom?" Julian leaned in slowly. "You weren't my secretary. You were my beginning." Sophia smiled. "I used to think power came from control," he continued. "Now I know it comes from love. From us." She leaned into his side. "From building something the world can't tear down." They watched Liam crawl awkwardly across the grass toward a butterfly. Julian said softly, "I want more." Sophia glanced at him. "More what?" "More laughter. More chaos. Maybe. Even more little feet." She laughed. "Let's survive the first one, Romeo." He wrapped an arm around her. "Then we'll build a world, one heartbeat at a time." Later that night, Sophia sat in her office, reviewing a sketch for her upcoming summer line. She paused and added a tiny detail to the sleeve, a stitched word, just visible in the corner. Family. Not inherited. Not bought. Not earned by perfection. But built. Fiercely. Gently. Together. And that made it real. Chapter 10. The Life We Chose. The morning sun streamed through the Kingsley townhouse like honey, thick, warm, and golden. It poured over plush rugs and soft furniture, highlighting toys scattered on the living room floor, half-finished coloring books, and one extremely determined toddler trying to wrestle a spoonful of oatmeal into his mouth. "Liam," Sophia said patiently, kneeling beside him. "Maybe aim for the bowl this time, not your forehead?" Liam looked up with his father's intense gray eyes and gave a triumphant squeal before flinging the spoon onto the floor. Sophia sighed. "So, that's a no." Julian appeared at the doorway, tie half-fastened, coffee in hand. He paused when he saw the scene and grinned. "I see our son is conducting another oatmeal experiment." "Yes. This one's called projectile viscosity." "Oh." Julian walked over, plucked Liam off the high chair, and kissed his chubby cheek. "You're lucky you're of the rabble." Liam responded with a sticky hug. Sophia wiped her hands and stood, adjusting the collar of Julian's shirt with the casual affection of someone who'd done it 100 times before. "Are you ready for your speech tonight?" Julian made a face. "Can't I skip it and stay here with you two?" "Afraid not. You're the keynote speaker." He gave a dramatic sigh. "You'd think marrying into chaos would excuse me from formal functions." She raised an eyebrow. "You were the chaos." "Fair point. That evening marked the 10th anniversary gala of the Kingsley Foundation, Julian's newly restructured nonprofit wing dedicated to supporting single parents and underfunded child welfare programs. He stood backstage, adjusting his cuffs, but his eyes were on Sophia and Liam, who sat in the front row beneath the soft ballroom lights. Liam was now almost a year old, his hair tousled, and his chubby hands busy squeezing a plush fox toy. Sophia wore a midnight blue gown that clung to her like the sky did to the stars, elegant, radiant, hers. Julian stepped up to the podium. 10 years ago, he began, the Kingsley Foundation was built on numbers, projections, and returns. Today, it's built on names, stories, second chances. He looked directly at Sophia. I used to think legacy was inherited. Now I know it's created. One life at a time. And the greatest legacy I will ever leave behind is the family I chose. Applause rippled through the crowd, but all Julian could hear was Liam's delighted clap and Sophia's tearful smile. After the event, as staff bustled around and donors sipped champagne, Sophia stood with Julian beneath the string lights of the terrace. You were incredible, she said, wrapping her arms around his waist. I just told the truth. You've changed. He kissed her slowly. You changed me. Liam gurgled from the stroller beside them, grinning with sleepy delight. Sophia leaned down and gently lifted him into her arms. Julian ran a hand over his son's back. Think he'll remember any of this? No, Sophia said, but we will. They stood there for a long time, the city stretching out behind them, the night wrapping them in a cocoon of light and laughter and everything they had built from brokenness. The next morning was quieter. No speeches, no flashing cameras, just coffee, cartoons, and a toddler learning to wobble on his feet across the living room rug. Sophia held her breath as Liam took 3 steps and promptly fell onto his bottom. Julian cheered like it was the Super Bowl. Again, he said, rushing to help him up. Sophia laughed. You're going to scare him with all that enthusiasm. He just walked. That's a big deal. She watched them, her husband and their son, and her heart ached with how full it was. She had once imagined motherhood would be something she did alone, quietly, unseen. But instead, it had become something sacred, shared, loud, chaotic, and rich with love. And marriage? That had once seemed like a trap, a cage. But Julian had made it a home. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real. The life she chose, the life they chose. Spring turned to summer, and with it came the grand opening of Liam and Little's flagship store in Soho. The modest storefront glowed with soft gold lettering and wide display windows filled with hand-stitched children's clothes, onesies shaped like foxes and bears, pastel cardigans, and tiny adventure-themed boots lined neatly beside a chalkboard sign that read, "Made with love for the little ones you'd move mountains for." Sophia stood in the center of the shop in a simple linen dress. Liam perched proudly on her hip as customers filtered in, some smiling shyly, others excitedly recounting how the brand had become a staple in their homes. Julian leaned against the back counter, arms crossed, watching with an unmistakable glint of pride in his eyes. You created this, he said, stepping beside her, from the ground up. Sophia adjusted Liam on her hip, her voice soft. I wanted a future for him. And somewhere along the way, I gave myself one too. Julian slipped his arm around her waist. I hope you know how proud I am. She looked up at him, eyes glowing. I do. Because you never let me forget it. That night, long after the last customer left and the store lights dimmed, they stood alone in the middle of the space they had once only imagined. Julian kissed her forehead. We built a world. Sophia nodded. And we get to live in it. Weeks passed in the golden haze of toddlerhood and partnership. Liam began talking in bursts. His favorite word, unsurprisingly, was no, followed closely by fox and waffle. Sophia's brand continued to blossom with steady, intentional growth, while Julian made good on his promise to restructure Kingsley Group. He cut ties with exploitative ventures and focused on ethical, sustainable development. The board had grumbled, but Julian no longer feared their disapproval. He answered to something far more powerful now. His family. One evening, after putting Liam to bed, Sophia found Julian on the rooftop terrace with a box in his hands. Inside were old photos, memos, and fragments of the life he once lived pre-Sophia, pre-Liam. He looked up. "I was going to burn this," he said. "All of it. But then I thought, maybe I should let you see who I was." Sophia sat beside him, pulling the box into her lap. There were news clippings, awards, stock charts, even a snapshot of Julian in his 20s, stone-faced, eyes empty, surrounded by a sea of corporate smiles. Sophia studied the photo quietly. "You looked powerful. I was, but never happy." She reached for his hand. "You are now?" He didn't hesitate. "Completely." She smiled. "Then we don't have to burn the past. Just let it rest." Autumn came again. Liam took his first unassisted steps in the Kingsley garden, arms flapping, face beaming. Julian recorded the whole thing, laughing like a boy himself. That evening, they sat on the porch swing, Liam asleep against Sophia's chest, the stars overhead twinkling like they were winking just for them. "I used to believe love made you weak," Julian said quietly. Sophia glanced at him. "And now?" He looked at her, his wife, his world. "Now I know it makes you unstoppable." She reached for his hand and held it over her heart. "We were both wrong about a lot of things, but never about each other." He leaned in and kissed her slowly, as the cool breeze rustled through the trees and the faint lullaby of the city played in the distance. The following week, Sophia returned to the Kingsley Tower not as a secretary, not as a name whispered in scandal, but as a guest speaker. She stood before a packed auditorium filled with young professionals, entrepreneurs, interns, and yes, even board members, and told her story, not the polished version, the real one, of being underestimated, of being afraid, of being fiercely determined to choose love anyway. "I didn't get here because I was perfect," she said. "I got here because I refused to let someone else define my worth. I got here because I believed in something bigger than reputation. I believed in family. And I chose it. Every day." The applause was thunderous. When she stepped off the stage, Julian was waiting. "You changed me," he said. She smiled, leaning into him. "And you loved me through it all." On their second anniversary, Julian gave Sophia a journal. The cover was soft leather, embossed with her initials, and a tiny fox in the corner. Inside the first page, he had written, "For every chapter we lived, and every one we've yet to write, this is the life we chose. And I'd choose it again, 1,000 times." She closed the journal with tears in her eyes and looked across the room where Liam was laughing at something on the floor, a chubby, bright-eyed boy with a crooked smile and too much energy for bedtime. Julian joined her on the couch, pulling her into his arms. "Are you happy?" he whispered. She nodded against his shoulder. "More than I ever imagined I could be." They sat in the hush of their home, hearts steady, hands entwined. The story had begun with suspicion, with heartbreak, with prejudice. It ended here, with peace, with love, with a family made, not born, and a life wholly and beautifully chosen. Side story. 3 years ago, the day she walked in, Julian Kingsley didn't believe in first impressions. He believed in patterns, numbers, predictability. So when Sophia Lane walked into his office for the first time, wide-eyed but determined, her resume oddly timed, her credentials just sharp enough to avoid scrutiny, he dismissed her with one glance. Too eager, he thought. Too clever. She's after something. He didn't realize until much later that it wasn't his wealth she wanted, but a chance. Still, even back then, something about her unsettled him. She was efficient, dangerously so. Within days, she had reorganized his executive schedule better than his last assistant of 2 years. She anticipated his caffeine needs, booked meetings that actually mattered, and somehow made sure he never had to see the same client twice in one day, which he hated. She didn't chatter. She didn't flatter. And she never once hesitated to raise an eyebrow when he barked unreasonable demands. She was unshakable. And it terrified him, because for the first time in years, he didn't just respect a subordinate, he noticed her. 18 months later, the late night, it was past midnight, and the building was empty except for one office light, hers. Julian stood silently outside her door, holding 2 cups of coffee. She hadn't seen him yet, completely engrossed in her work. Headphones in, brows furrowed, and she was smiling softly to herself as she flipped through financial reports like they were bedtime stories. He didn't know what startled him more, that she was still working without being asked, or that she looked happy doing it. When she finally looked up and noticed him, she pulled her headphones out and blinked. "Mr. Kingsley, is something wrong?" He shook his head and handed her the coffee. "You forgot to take a break." She smiled, gently. "You're paying me to keep your empire running, remember?" He should have turned around, should have said something cold, professional. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe and said quietly, "It's more than that." She tilted her head. More than what? But he never answered, because he didn't have the courage yet. A year later, the gala night. The board gala was a blur of tuxedos and political smiles. Sophia stood across the room in a navy blue gown, chatting with one of the junior executives. Julian pretended not to notice, but he did. She laughed at something, the kind of laugh that didn't belong in cold rooms like this. It belonged on rooftops, on quiet porches, in sunlit kitchens. He downed a scotch and looked away. And when someone approached and asked if he'd ever considered Sophia as more than just his secretary, he replied stiffly, "She's not my type." But inside, he was already wondering what her favorite flower was. 6 months before the pregnancy, the turning point. She had sprained her ankle retrieving archived documents no one else had bothered to look for. When HR notified him, he didn't hesitate. He left the boardroom mid-presentation and drove her to the clinic himself. She sat in the passenger seat with her jaw clenched, trying not to show pain. He glanced over. "You should have asked someone else to carry those." She shrugged. Didn't seem worth troubling anyone. That answer, that quiet survival instinct in her tone, it gutted him. He didn't say much during the ride. But when he dropped her home, he waited until she'd made it up the stairs before he exhaled. That night, he stood in his penthouse kitchen, staring at the empty wine glass she'd once used at a work dinner. And he whispered to no one, "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" The night they crossed the line, they were the last ones left after the executive launch celebration. Julian was unusually relaxed. Sophia, in a rare moment of vulnerability, had smiled at him in a way that made the world slow. "You don't always have to be cold, you know," she'd said softly, and he replied with a voice quieter than a whisper, "With you, I don't want to be." It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategy. It was years of denial, breaking apart in one breathless kiss. But the next morning, he told himself it was a mistake, because Julian Kingsley didn't know how to be loved, and he certainly didn't believe he deserved it. Now, after Liam's birth, Julian often wakes in the early morning before anyone else. He walks through the nursery in silence, watches his son sleep, and stands at the doorway where he can see Sophia curled in their bed, peaceful, soft, home. And he remembers how he judged her, pushed her away, called her the very thing he feared the most to risk, because deep down, he knew from the start, she could undo him. And she did, not with seduction or secrets, but with kindness, competence, a quiet refusal to quit, a gentle steadiness he'd never known before. She made him laugh. She made him better. And she made him real. Final reflection. Julian Kingsley didn't fall in love all at once. He built it like everything else in his life. But unlike his skyscrapers and stock portfolios, this was something fragile, something sacred. And once he allowed himself to feel it, he realized the truth. He hadn't just fallen for her. He had always been falling. From the moment she walked through his office door with quiet fire in her eyes, and he'd never wanted to land so badly in his life.